This frame may be the most famous frame in the entire SpongeBob series, but the episode it originates in is honestly mediocre at best. However, with a few key writing changes, the Two Faces of Squidward could have been an episode worthy of containing handsome Squidward. The Two Faces of Squidward has a bit of a clunky opening. The episode begins with Squidward being annoyed by SpongeBob and Patrick singing baby nursery rhymes. Ugh. Then, through them just kind of being generally obnoxious, Squidward gets hit in the face with a door, which is the inciting incident of the episode. So in better episodes, Squidward is also annoyed at SpongeBob and Patrick, but their actions are usually something that we as the audience can recognize annoy Squidward, while SpongeBob and Patrick don't annoy us. Let's compare the baby nursery rhyme chanting opening of this episode to SpongeBob and Patrick's antics in the opening of Squidville, as both openings involve SpongeBob and Patrick doing something irresponsible that leads to the inciting incident of each respective episode. In Squidville, SpongeBob and Patrick are playing with reef blowers, and through their mishandling of these oversized hair dryers, they terrorize Squidward and even destroy his house. Yet, while they're wreaking havoc with this nautical-themed gardening equipment, they still remain likable characters, even though we can understand why Squidward is irritated by them. So why does Squidville's opening work while the opening of the Many Faces of Squidward doesn't? Well, Squidville's opening is both more outlandish and more subtle than these baby nursery rhymes. Sounds crazy, I know, but hear me out. It's more outlandish because of the exaggerated slapstick action, but at the same time, it's a more subtle opening because playing with something like a leaf blower is behavior we can believe of slightly immature adults, whereas SpongeBob and Patrick in Two Faces of Squidward behave more like small children, which no one likes seeing that. Squidville also has a lot more heart to its opening, because later on in the episode, when Squidward moves away from SpongeBob and Patrick because of what they did with the reef blowers, he ends up playing with a reef blower himself after his character journey taught him to be more playful like SpongeBob and Patrick. In contrast, the nursery rhymes have nothing to do with the emotional journey of the characters, and Squidward just happens to get hit in the face with a door, which starts the story. The door is nothing more than just an object that does a thing. It doesn't represent anything larger, like how the reef blowers in Squidville represent the fun and playfulness that Squidward lacks and learns to embrace after undergoing his character arc. This leads me to my next issue with the opening of the Two Faces of Squidward. It fails to establish the main theme. The episode would go on to have an okay message about how being conventionally attractive and the attention that comes with it isn't all it's cracked out to be. But the problem is that Squidward is not established as a person who even wants to be attractive. Like, sure, I can believe that he wants to be. I suppose most people want to be hot, but that doesn't automatically apply to everyone. Some people want good looks to attract partners or to be in movies or maybe just generally get more attention, while others may be totally fine with how they look. Which of those things is Squidward? I don't know. The episode doesn't tell us. Now, maybe if you watched other episodes of the show and know Squidward is this pretentious artsy guy, you could infer that he's someone who would want to be handsome. But an episodic show like SpongeBob should never rely on viewers having watched other episodes in order to understand that valuable context. I recently covered the episode Dying for Pie and talked about how it succeeds as a good SpongeBob episode. You should check that video out, link in the description. And I mentioned how that episode puts in the work to establish to the audience that Squidward dislikes SpongeBob and finds him annoying, so that when he chooses to spend time with SpongeBob after giving him the bomb pie, it's satisfying to the audience. Imagine if that episode just assumed you already knew the characters and didn't have any moments where Squidward and SpongeBob interacted until the conflict began. Don't you think it would be missing something? In order to fix the opening, we have to tie what is happening between SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward to the main theme of the episode. This task is not as easy as it sounds. We need to 1. Have SpongeBob and Patrick do something that annoys Squidward. 2. Have that action result in Squidward being hit in the face with specifically the kitchen door. 3. Have SpongeBob be responsible for Squidward's injury. And 4. Have the initial action be related to Squidward having some kind of insecurity about his looks. My first change would be to put Patrick outside of the kitchen, so that Patrick and SpongeBob interact over Squidward. Then I make it so that SpongeBob and Patrick are playing with different hats, throwing them back and forth from the kitchen over Squidward. Then some fashionista guy appears out of the crowd and compliments Patrick on his hat. At that point, Squidward changes his attitude, saying something belittling of Patrick's looks and saying he'd look better in the hat, establishing a character flaw of caring too much about appearance. Squidward then puts on Patrick's hat and the fashionista goes, you'd never pulled that off. And then we'd hear that little music effect. You know the one, when something pathetic happens. Yeah, that one. And then Squidward would start trying to take off the hat to find out he literally can't pull it off. He calls for SpongeBob to help him get the hat off, but he's so disoriented that he stumbles by the door at the moment SpongeBob opens it right on his face. With these changes, SpongeBob remains annoying to Squidward without annoying the audience. We get a chance for some better humor with all the hat throwing, and we establish Squidward's insecurity towards his looks right at the very beginning. I think this opening is leaps and bounds better than they're singing nursery rhymes and I guess they hit him with a door. After Squidward gets injured, he's taken to the hospital, and there are just way too many scenes between Squidward hurting his face and him getting the bandages off. When they first get to the hospital, SpongeBob is told they won't know if Squidward will recover for 2 weeks. And then there's a time skip to SpongeBob coming back after that time has passed. Why have this time skip? What does it accomplish? Is it because in real life it would take that long to recover from a procedure like this? It's a cartoon. Who cares? I usually never say that, but in this case it really applies. Like, why are you slowing down your story for the sake of medical realism? If Squidward got face surgery that same day, I can easily accept that as the logic of the story. So after the unnecessary time skip, SpongeBob shows up back to the hospital and greets the nurse.
Good morning, Nurse Ratchet.
I'm sorry, is that a Neptune-damned One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest reference? While I love a good sophisticated literary reference in a kid's show, calling this nurse Nurse Ratchet was not earned at all. In the original novel, Nurse Ratchet is the main authority figure in a mental institution who prioritizes exerting power over the patients over their recovery. She is the representation of the failure of our system to choose good leaders, and a commentary on how those in power often don't have your best interests at heart, and one of the best dang villains in literature. So does this character embody any of that dense characterization that justifies her bearing this name? No, she's just a background character who is a nurse. That is where the similarities end. The location isn't even a mental institution, it's just a regular hospital. You can't just reference a name like that without having it be in some way thematically relevant to the story. Whatever, I'm sorry for the literary crash out there. Then they make some pointless joke about this one old lady being deaf, just wasting time. And then we finally get to Squidward getting these dang bandages removed. There is a bit of an extended bit here where SpongeBob keeps interrupting the doctor, which I will be fair and admit is pretty funny. And while SpongeBob is being annoying, we as the audience can give him a pass because he's concerned for his friend. Also, the fact that it takes so long to remove the bandages does help build suspense of the reveal of Squidward's new face. However, this sequence would have been better if it happened almost immediately after Squidward got hurt. So I'd read it like this. Squidward gets hit, cut to hospital, SpongeBob is shown to have been waiting for a while, doctor says come in, boom, we're here. And we can use the about 1 minute of screen time we cut out, which is an eternity in 11-minute cartoon time, to expand the story after this point, which, as we'll get into, is necessary. So, funny thing, when I was writing this script, I initially referred to the concept of a character getting hit in the face and turning handsome as a cartoon cliche. I was like, yeah, this is something every cartoon does at some point, but actually, I couldn't find an example of this being a thing in any other show. It might have been, and please let me know in the comments below if there's another show that did this, but I think it's funny that this concept seems enough like a cartoon cliche that I almost referred to it as one, when, as far as I know, this is the first time a cartoon has done this. So once Squidward gets handsome, he starts getting a bunch of attention from the background fish, and if there's one thing SpongeBob's background fish are good at, it's overreacting and forming a mob. This series of scenes does a good job at slowly increasing the amount of Bikini Bottomites following Squidward until we as the audience start to notice things getting out of hand. That night, the crowd stands outside Squidward's house all night chanting, and then the next morning, they all start attacking Squidward, trying to get a piece of his shirt, which shifts Squidward's attitude. So I don't really know how I feel about this whole element of the story. On the one hand, it's simple and easy to follow, and while absurd, follows enough internal logic that I still buy it could happen within the universe. But on the other hand, I think that because it is so simple, it provides less commentary on the social issue the episode wants to engage with. Like, do these sequences properly teach the lesson that being physically attractive isn't all it's cracked up to be? I kinda get the commentary. These people don't like you for you, they just like you for your looks, and they'll tear you apart as long as it serves them. But I think what it's missing is what Squidward really has to lose. Sure, being trampled and having your shirt ripped aren't fun, but those are only physical consequences. What the episode lacks are emotional consequences. There's one moment in the episode where they almost engage with this, and it's when Squidward tries to play the clarinet for the crowd. At first, they hate it, but when they see that it's Squidward playing, they love it just because he's handsome. In this moment, Squidward is shown as a oblivious to this contradiction, and arrogantly assumes that he's just awesome at clarinet. I'll admit this is in character. Squidward is often portrayed as not self-aware of his own shortcomings as a musician, but what if in this moment he noticed something was off? After all, he's not used to this kind of applause, so maybe he could have been like, wait a minute, and then played purposefully bad to test if it was just because of his looks. Then he could make a painting that he knows is awful to show the crowd. At first he would hide behind the painting, to which they all boo and jeer, until Squidward pokes his head out and all of a sudden the crowd loves it. At this point, he would realize that nothing he could ever do in regards to his passions for music and art would matter, because people would automatically like it regardless of if he did a good job, which would make him lose his passion for those things entirely. Now, don't you think it would be a much more meaningful story if Squidward chose to stop being handsome for that reason, rather than choosing to stop being handsome because the crowd was going to beat him up or whatever? Like, if it were you, you'd obviously choose not to be handsome if your life was at stake. Everyone would, which is why it's not an interesting choice. But choosing artistic authenticity over your own looks, now that's a choice. And wouldn't you come off that episode with a new respect for Squidward as a character, knowing that even though he's not good at clarinet or painting, that he cares about those things so much that he'd rather do them authentically? Now, we don't know if Squidward would actually make that choice, because the writers didn't give him the opportunity to make it. Instead, they chose this easier life at stake conflict that many cartoons default to. I've also got one other gripe in the episode. So after the crowd attacks Squidward in the bathtub, he goes to SpongeBob for help, and we are assaulted by this shot. Earlier in the episode, SpongeBob did mention kind of randomly that he was going to clip his toenails, but in the story that happened a day earlier, has he been clipping his toenails for 18 hours? Also, with this shot and then Squidward running in with a towel, there's just a lot of unnecessary tension in this scene, and I don't like that. This episode did not need whatever this was. Ew. Then we set up the climax, and the original episode does have a pretty strong ending. The crowd being seen out of every window of the Krusty Krab really sells the stakes, and Krabs being unhelpful to Squidward and actually willing to help the crowd get to him puts our heroes on a clock to unhandsome Squidward as soon as possible. Then, after Squidward gets hit with the door 5 times, we get the handsome Squidward. It's just so perfect. It's the perfect combination of funny, but also believable. It's not I actually think it's handsome, but I get why it is in this exaggerated sense. It's just so perfect. Do you think that when the artist presented this drawing, did they know just how iconic it would be? Something that makes handsome Squidward work is how little he appears on screen, only getting about 45 seconds or so of screen time. Something this exaggerated only works when it's brief. Looking at you, Nosferatu. Then this shoe falls through the Krusty Krab roof. Oh yeah, I guess I should explain why that happens. So earlier in the episode, there are these jokes where Squidward makes someone in a wheelchair able to walk and a blind person see because he's so handsome. And then this third guy, because in comedy the third thing is always unexpected, goes, I can fly, and he does in fact fly, showing that Squidward one-upped Jesus Christ. I cannot believe I just said that line in a video. Then the flying guy's shoe falls off because it's untied, and that's the same shoe that falls through the roof of the Krusty Krab in the last scene. Two problems with this. First off, flying guy happened the day before, and he also wasn't flying anywhere near the Krusty Krab. So why is the shoe falling in the Krusty Krab just now? Look, plenty of things happen in cartoons that don't make sense. You can pull an axe out of your back pocket, nuclear explosions happen out of nowhere, a crab sired a whale. Heck, I even said earlier in this video that this episode could have used more cartoon logic. It's a wacky world, but all this wacky stuff does operate on its own sort of internal logic and makes sense when contained to these specific situations. A shoe saying suspended in space for an entire day and moving sideways to this location just doesn't make any sense, no matter how cartoonish the world is. And it would have been so easy for this to make sense. Just show the flying guy flying over the Krusty Krab and have his shoe fall off then. This actually would be better, because when his shoe falls off in the earlier scene, it leaves the audience confused as to why it happens. It's a much better and much more unexpected setup and payoff to just have the guy come back. I really don't understand why they didn't write it that way. So the shoe falls, SpongeBob pushes Squidward, he does the meme stumble and turns back to normal Squidward. Having learned his lesson, showing that being handsome isn't everything. And there's also a nice moment where SpongeBob says that he loves Squidward no matter what he looks like, showing that your real friends won't care about the way you look. Pretty good lesson, I'll give it that. But it could have had a better time getting there. On its own, the Two Faces of Squidward is not the worst season 5 episode, as it does offer a coherent story, some good jokes, and an extremely memorable ending. But it does lack some of the polish and storytelling grit that other episodes of the show have in spades. And I can tell that some corners were cut in the writing process and some lines and moments weren't fully thought out. I wonder, if the team knew how legendary Handsome Squidward would become, do you think they would have made sure his flagship episode had just a little bit more quality? So, what did you think of my critiques? What would you have done differently? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy what I have to say, liking and subscribing goes a long way, but if you really want to help me get this channel to a place where I can make more consistent quality content for you guys, I do have a Patreon, or you can become a channel member. Also, check out my gaming channel where I cover the SpongeBob GBA games, among other things. That's all for me. See you next time.